call the meeting to order, the Salem High School Building Committee meeting, March 20th, 6 o'clock. Nate's not here this evening, so you'll have to bear with my Robert's Rules of Order as best as I can. I don't think we have a quorum yet, so we'll hold on the vote for approval of the minutes. Do that a little bit later. So with that, Margaret, I'll turn it over to you for the milestone schedule review and next steps.
Yeah, and also, folks, I'm going to send a link out, just because it's so far away. I'll send a link out in just a minute with the material if you want to take a look at it on the screen. So hopefully this is familiar. You'll see that I got added these two big fat arrows on here. The dotted line is where we are now, so March 20th. We successfully made the preliminary design program submission right after our meeting last week, and the MSBA confirmed that it was complete. And so now we're moving forward on that second blue line, which is the preferred schematic report. In this phase, having done all the due diligence, the building committee will select a preferred option, and the design team will develop the preferred option in order to send it to the MSBA. This committee will be voting at the end of June, and the MSBA will be voting in August. There's a weird gap here, a little longer gap than usual between MSBA meetings. So I just want to note that we are going to ask to add a meeting, a May 8th meeting, which is not in your calendar right now, because that is what seems to be, and you'll see this on the next schedule, seems to be the kind of optimum time that we will have the material ready for you all to look at and vote on it. So that's the summary of this slide. Let's look at the next one. So again, hopefully this is starting to look familiar, although it may be hard to read from a distance. So I want to draw attention to the orange items, and I'll walk you through them. So first column is the You Are Here column, and this is the end of June meeting read as a submission of the preferred schematic report. So a couple things are happening. So first of all, we've tentatively scheduled some public meetings. So we give them a date for the sustainability workshop that we've been talking about for a while. Looks like it will be on Thursday, April 10th. And then right after the vacation, we're going to have two community meetings, one in person and one on Zoom. So the in-person one will be here at the high school, and then one on Zoom. And that is going to be to share with the community these options that you all are taking up and considering. Also going on, we finally identified some dates for going on school visits. So it looks like a week from Friday, not tomorrow, but a week from Friday, there's an opportunity to visit Bill Ricca and Stoneham. If you're interested, some members of the school committee are also interested. So I want to get, it'd be great if you could email me and let me know if you're interested in going on the 28th. The second opportunity we haven't done it would be during the week of April vacation week. And part of the reason for that is right here is where the school budget is being discussed. So these 2 weeks, 2 weeks just before April vacation are really jam-packed for the district leadership and the staff. So we're trying to kind of manage around knowing that they'll be busy and wanting them to be participating. So school visits, community meetings. This here is this new meeting that we introduced. There is a meeting on the calendar on the 15th, but we want to get a meeting on either side of it. One on the 8th, which would be the vote on the preferred option, and one on the 22nd, which would then be reviewing the development of the preferred option that gets selected on the 8th. So any questions about that? Yeah.
Just an FYI that I believe there's a city council meeting on the 8th, and that is when the budget is being filed for the city. So I just a heads up. I don't know what that means for schedules, but just a heads up.
Okay. you want to go back to the minutes?
We have a form now?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other questions on this?
Any other questions on the schedule?
Just to clarify, you're talking 3 meetings in May or 2?
Two.
Okay.
So there, right now, if you look on the 15th, there's a meeting, I took it out. And I put a meeting on either side. So one week before, one week after. And what will happen after this meeting is then Lisa will have an opportunity to adjust the invites in your calendar, so everybody's got a record of it. Can't remember what's on the next slide. Okay, so then this would be, if you want to go back to the
Sure.
vote on the minutes.
No other questions on this?
The 22nd is the student plus sign. Isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
22nd is the 7th. The 30th work? We'll have to come up with a date.
Yeah, that's,
That's fine.
So we're definitely taking the 15th off. 15th is off.
All right, so back to the minutes?
but we still have the 17th.
If everyone had a chance to review the minutes from the February 27th meeting, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes. Any discussion or comments? Second? All in favor? All opposed? Minutes are approved. Overview of the PDP?
Yeah, let me just send this link. There we go. Okay, so you all will remember that when we met with you on the 27th, we presented the content of the PDP and we made the comment that we felt there was more work to do on right sizing some of the square footages of spaces, and that was going to have a direct impact on the cost of the project. So this is, by the way, only 9 through 12, so we also did all the same pieces for 7, 12, but this is where we're really focused here. So these were the numbers on February 27th that I presented as the tentative project costs for the different options. We were able to reduce the program by about 36,000 square feet, and that resulted in a pretty direct reduction in the new construction options in cost. So you can see this is where we were before the reduction in size 521, for the loop version 461, now 17 for wrapped, now 460. So that was a good exercise. This is the data that actually went into the submission. What's the next slide? The other thing that we wanted to update you about was we had a lot of discussion about the auditorium as a result of the wanting to go back and look. So the version of the program that we brought you had an auditorium that was based on the MSBA reimbursable area. I don't remember exactly what it is, but that seats 690 students. It has 690 seats, and it would be fully reimbursable at that size. And we have included a black box theater. There are a lot of discussions with staff about this. Should we have a bigger auditorium? Do we need the black box? Where we are at the moment is we kept it as it was presented to you for a bunch of reasons. This version seems to provide the most flexibility for the school and for the community use of the school. And as a note, the current auditorium that you have here now has 635 seats on risers, and then there's that flat area in front which seats another 200. So what we heard was nobody could point me to an event where all of the 635 seats have been full. So it tends to be a little bit of both. So the feeling was the flat area isn't doing anything for us. Let's take that area, make it be essentially turn it into a separate space, a black box, and make a functional 690 seat bigger. And then, as examples, these are 2 auditoria that Ferguson Will has built at that size. So this goes back to the, if we can all, for those of you can come and visit, we'll have a chance to see a couple of these.
And those have balconies to accommodate, both of them do. Mhm.
Right. So that was another thing that came out of the review, and then there was
Margaret, could you just clarify that it's a black box, but it's really a multi-purpose space?
why don't you clarify that?
So the black box, we wouldn't necessarily call it a black box theater. We would call it a multi-purpose space because you could have robotics, you could have career fairs, meetings, you can do Shakespeare, small theater, but you can do anything in it. We would deal with the acoustics, you could do orchestra. It's just a very flexible space for all of those uses, and we'll probably call it a multi-purpose space so people aren't confused that it isn't just designated for theater.
Any questions about that? Okay, what's next? Oh, what we're doing now that we've made the submission, there's 3 main activities. So the staff is looking at utilization of the classrooms because we took out a few classrooms, but there's still a lot of classrooms relative to the number of students. We're going to have a meeting with Mario Souza and the CTE staff. Some of you may know that Mario's been out quite a bit on leave the last month or 2, so we haven't actually had a chance to get together with him and really do what these guys need, which is a detailed program of these spaces. And that will determine whether the areas that are in the program right now are accurate to what's needed. And then the last is, Ferguson Will, you put a sample there, that's great. They have developed, and superintendent and Glenn have circulated to department heads now detailed surveys that are asking them for information about their specific spaces. So if anybody wanted to see samples of those surveys, we can send them around. Next, school committee update. I plugged this in, but do you want to say anything about?
I can just share. I mean, the school committee members in here, I think Cornell's name tonight. I think just a couple updates. I think the school committee had a chance to review the space summary and the end plan, and we had a good conversation the other night about those aspects. I think they have Margaret shared, an interest in going to visit other schools. Like many of you have expressed interest as well. I think it does help to see these spaces, and so I think a number of them will be visiting next week, and then potentially during April vacations, if we can get a chance to weigh in a little bit. I think there's this feeling. I think it was helpful to clarify that there's still an opportunity to weigh in on space, not necessarily like the square footage aspect of it, but certainly around like what aspect, what are some of the things that make these schools pop and resonate with school committee members, and I would encourage all of you to be part of that as well. I know it was very helpful for the high school team when they had a chance to go out and look at some of these spaces. It does change. It's one thing to look at it on a screen and another to see it in person. So, there was that conversation. I think we obviously have some follow-up work to do around the CTE spaces, around the scheduling. I mean, as I said at the school committee the other night, we're struggling to wrap our heads around the fact that we are in a building right now that is way bigger than what we need, right? So everybody's operating with a lot more space, and it's hard for all of us to think differently about it for teachers, for administrators, and I understand, they've just become very accustomed to a school that's, was built for almost 1,000 more students than what we actually, have. So there's an adjustment, and I think we're all trying to wrap our heads around. So when we were listing the number of classroom spaces we needed, we had a very exorbitant number of those because we do use a lot of classroom spaces now. But
But you do use them all now. It's not like we
do
didn't
use
find
them,
any empty glass.
It's not the most efficient way of,
Yeah.
plan. So, there's that, and I think the school committee's also very interested, I don't wanna speak for them, but I know that they, are interested in the public conversations about the designs. I think they're really, concerned, or not concerned, they're committed to having public discussions so people can give feedback and input on, the different designs, and so I think they're looking forward to that. They want those scheduled. April is a very busy time because we're gonna be in budget season, so we're trying to
Right.
figure out how to do that. And I don't, that has to be done by when exactly, Margaret?
Well, can we go back to my kind of 3-week look ahead, 3-month look ahead
Yeah.
slide for a second? So, the deadline that we're headed to is June 26th. So
June
we need to make
26th.
the submission, the consultancy needs to make a submission on June 26th. So, what we thought was June 18th, the Thursday before that,
Yeah.
would be a good day for the final vote. But we want to give you at least a week to chew on the material. So the way this is constructed is backing up a week to give you a vote date, a week to give you a presentation, so you are able to ask questions, and then coming the other direction, this would be where the vote on the preferred option would be, and then Perkins and Will needs to do the development, have detailed estimating of it done, which takes about 2 weeks, in order to bring you here both the design development and the estimating information that you need to make the final decision. So it's those two processes are flowing together. So again, the May 8th would be the vote on the preferred option. At that point, what we're focusing on is making sure that the design is detailed enough that we can bring you numbers that hold up as we move into schematic design, and you're able to decide, you've got good information to make a decision on
I might-
to vote to authorize.
But I'll chime in here because in this phase, we have to develop 3 options. That's required. Major renovation, which is major renovation of this building. I imagine you'll go with a minor renovation, major addition, and probably 1 new construction. In order for us to do that, so you can really evaluate them, we need a good program done. Once we select a preferred option, we need the program because we have to design where everything goes, the relationship of parts, what we have in there. And so I want to say it's pressing. It's pressing to, if things change 50 square feet or if something comes out, we'll manage, but we really need a program. We feel we're really close to one, and that's great. We feel good about where we are, but we need to be realistic that this needs to get done. So it is pressing, and we'll do whatever we need to do to help you get there, and I know everybody's been doing that, but I'd say sooner than later.
Well, we should probably then have a meeting to talk. I really do want to nail down the public
Yeah.
sessions because I do think that's going to be, it's important to me, but I know it's also going to be very important to the
Yeah.
school committee.
Well, the public sessions can happen anytime during, if they want to weigh into which is the preferred option, that's something that would happen over the next 6 weeks, 5 weeks. And then the development of the preferred option happens, May and June. So,
I mean, the advantage of having the public meetings here is that when we meet the next week, we'll be bringing to this committee the feedback that we
Yeah.
got. So, I mean, that feels well aligned to me. We're gonna have to look at the 22nd date, for a second meeting, but other than that, that's how the pieces fit together. Okay.
but there are other meetings here that aren't highlighted in orange, right? There's a meeting on the 4/17.
Oh, yeah.
And the
we-
meet-
we still
right.
have- we have a building committee on the 17th, just before April vacation, which will be maybe the confusion, I'm saying here vote on preferred options, we vote on preferred options, so then they're taking forward
Right.
the, checking the box for each category from here to the end, right?
So, I can't read that, but
I know,
the preferred option, that is the preferred, the last preferred option, it's either the Reno, the
Yes.
rehab Reno, or the
No.
new. In each category? Or
No.
just
One.
one? Okay, and that's fine, and I understand the balance between moving things and having time to review. So we have a nice week built in at the end before we vote to send it in red.
yeah.
How far in advance will we have the balance of the information before we vote on the preferred option? That seems like a big choice, right?
You talking about
I'm talking somewhere over in the, to the left.
this one?
Yeah,
Um,
and I understand you can't have it all, right, because you move.
Yeah.
There.
you'd like to see it before the meeting.
Kinda,
being asked
you know,
about.
it seems like a big vote,
Yeah.
you know?
Is that the week of the 12th that we're talking about in June, Margaret? That there
Yeah, so
we
there's
start to
another
get a-
opportunity.
we
So,
get a briefing.
yeah,
and
coming
then-
out of this meeting, we've only got 3 options. Coming out of this meeting, we're pointing to one. And here we're saying, here's the one, and here's all the stuff that goes with it.
What I think what Matt's saying is
Exactly. What I
that
heard.
May 8th meeting is a vote to take the 3 options and narrow it to a single preferred
Yeah,
option.
so narrow
That
it
would
to
get
the 3
developed
options.
through the rest of May and June to be voted into. It's good, let's go.
We
No.
have to develop 3.
But-
This is my mistake.
Up until
No.
May
Yeah.
8th.
I don't know if you said, can I just say,
Yeah.
right now, we're developing 3 options.
Yeah.
That date, vote on the preferred option of 5/8 is when you select the preferred option.
Yeah.
Then we only take one option forward
Yeah, no,
from
we
5/8
just-
on.
We get that, it's just, will there be some time before the May 8th meeting where the committee can have access to the schemes, the
Yeah.
preliminary, ultra preliminary cost comparison, more or less, whatever?
Yeah.
Can that happen on April 28th to the 2nd? The week before the May 8th meeting? There.
Yes, I think if we gave everybody the material on the Friday before, do you think that's possible?
We'll look at that. I don't think the cost will be an order of magnitude
Yeah,
like
that's
you're
fine.
getting now.
No, that's fine.
And honestly, I mean, those site plans, that level of detail will be the level of detail probably that you'll see when you look at the 3 options. We will revise them, but the amount of detail on the site plans that you've been seeing is a pretty high level of detail for this phase. They will be adjusted for the options, but it will be generally like that. What we need to do is dig into the building more, and now that we have a program, we can do that. But in your minds, know that what you're seeing, renovation only, obviously not where everything goes, but that option, the major addition, the butterfly, or what do we call it, the mirror scheme, that's
Boomerang.
the boomerang scheme, that's really we're gonna evolve it, but it's kind of generally like that. And then the new construction, and that's what we wanna talk
We're gonna
about
talk
tonight. We'll probably iterate on that, where there'll be some further development, and maybe a lot of fun changes, but once we know where the site is, whether it's the loop in the front or next to Highland.
So the question remains, can the committee see a?
Yeah,
preview
we
of
will
that?
get you something in advance.
Yes. I don't know if it'll be the Friday before or the Monday before, but I can promise you that it'll be one or the other.
We'll show you where we are.
Yeah.
No, and I think so you're trying to set up design workshop meetings always before the
Yeah.
big meeting, so that group will be able to
Yeah, we're
see.
doing those on the Tuesday before the meeting.
So you,
Yeah.
So, that's more, just specific,
Yeah.
seems like that's the big choice, and the one at the end is just.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, that's fine, sounds great, thank you.
I want to come back to the school committee's the school committee's asking for additional public venues where it would be focused exclusively on what Ferguson Wells presenting and saying these are the options, and let's take feedback, or should we just be messaging this meeting better as we've been here every Thursday, you know, whatever, the third Thursday of the month, and why isn't anyone coming? I don't mean to be.
Yeah. I'm not sure we've really built, I mean, we invited people to these meetings, but I'm not sure we've really built them as, it's not an opportunity for like two-way conversation.
Okay, I just want to know what the
I think they
goal
want
is.
my impression from Monday is they want an opportunity to ask questions,
Yeah.
right? So they want a brief update, ask a couple questions. We're starting now making sure that they get the minutes right when they're distributed so that they aren't having to go look on the website, and
Okay,
I think it'll be good.
But I
That's
think,
one I understand
I
the
think
goal.
we should have at least one meeting where we go into like families, like a public conversation,
Mhm.
just to show them,
Yeah.
get some input. I think that would go over well. Nothing again, this just seemed more formal.
that's fine, I just want to understand.
Not
the
that
goal.
you're scaring people or anything like that. But that's, and I do, there was a fair bit of conversation that all of you also represent the Salem community, parents, your taxpayers, most people here live in the city. So, but I do think I wanted to build something that would be just for like families in the district to come and just weigh in a more informal setting than this. Just two more things I wanted to add. We have talked also about communications after these meetings to the public, and Chris's role, for those that don't know, Chris was our director of communications, but to get like a one-pager out that's like friendly to the community about what happens in these meetings. Because we want to start ramping up to like, obviously there's a vote coming, but here's what's happening, so people are, and so something that, not too many words, definitely some pictures, but more to give people just like the most salient points of these meetings. And so Beth Ann Cornell and Chris, we're going to work on what that looks like. We'd love any, maybe some input from other folks, but we want to get it out a couple days after the meetings so people know, kind of we're moving along where we are in ways it's not like so super technical, but
Yeah.
that
No,
the
it's a
public
good
can
idea to
digest.
kind of raise people's consciousness
Yeah.
of the projects that are available.
Right.
So, clarify for me,
Sure.
prior to sending it to the MSBA in June,
June.
does the school committee and or the city council have to have any votes?
City council does not.
Okay.
It's not required.
Okay.
Sometimes communities decide they want to have a formal presentation to city council. At the time, the MSBA isn't looking for it. The MSBA looks for school committee and the building committee and the mayor. So it's basically superintendent, executive, the mayor, and the school committee chair are the three entities that have to sign the documents that we are submitting.
I would think it'd be, not necessarily in this time frame, but I think when we talk about the ideas of getting out, I think for when it does have to go to the code for financing, it'd be good to get to other areas like, council of aging,
Yep.
senior center, a lot of the people who are gonna be your voters,
Right.
who may not have kids in school,
Yeah.
along with the parents or prospective parents, and things like
Yeah.
that, just to make sure that we're teed up for hopefully, if we get to that point, a
Yeah.
vote and the public is really.
So, we're gonna, Nate couldn't be here tonight, but you all might remember even before we came on, the event came on, there was a communications working group formed that some of you were part of, Chris, Betsy, Megan. So, that group started having discussions a couple of months
who emailed me, I think today, and said he wanted to be part of the building committee. And he said, when's the next meeting? And I said, tonight. Here he is. Junior, right?
Yes.
At Salem High School. And I know he's not officially
Yeah.
a member, but he expressed interest. I know we haven't always had the students consistent, but I told him, we meet once a month, roughly, and would love to have him attend tonight so he can learn a little bit more. Maybe, if you don't run away, if you like it enough, then maybe that's something that the committee can consider if you want to add.
Can you see
Awesome.
where you're sitting?
I'm looking at her computer.
I'm trying to share my
okay.
computer,
Great.
So I
but
just want
As
to
long as you can
welcome
see.
Welcome, Rollins.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Any other
Dr.
questions
Dre.
on school committee update or the overview of the PDP submission? Hearing none. Brooke, Patrick, you guys want to look at?
Yeah, we're gonna do
Sign
the good
up.
stuff.
all right, so, as you know, we submitted the PDP, and who read it? Who looked at it? Raise your hand.
It's 4,000 pages long.
Did it help you fall asleep? Yes, there's a lot of pages, and we did what was required, which is on this list, which is what we've been talking about. So if you have any questions about the submission, if you want to look at anything in particular, there's a tab on the side, so you don't have to scroll through all the pages to get to the section you want to look at. So I don't know how much detail you want to get in here tonight. We're just telling you it was submitted. You have access to it. If there's a particular section, go ahead and try to find that section through the tab. And again, if you have any questions, go through Margaret, and we're happy to answer them. We also wanted to talk about something important for tonight, which is something we've been talking about since the beginning of this meeting, which is the fact that we have to narrow down to 3 options in this phase. And we know that we'll go with A21, which is renovation only, the mirror scheme, Margaret likes to call it the boomerang, at A32, which is keeping the field house and then a major addition. So that's that phase construction. And we have 2 new construction options. And if possible, it would be nice if we could find or build consensus around which new construction option we may move forward. I'm confident that the design working group might have some thoughts on this, which you may be interested in their recommendation. And I don't know if we really need to go through these because you've seen them a lot and nothing's changed. This is renovation only, the renovation of the field house, and then a major addition. This is what we call the loop scheme, which is closer to Wilson Avenue, and this is one of the new construction options, and then the wrap scheme, which is also a new construction off of Highland. So we're really interested in what people think about this option, which is the loop and the wrapped. That's really would be a great thing if we could accomplish that tonight, because it allows us to move forward with the 3 options and jump right into that tomorrow. We did put together a matrix of valuation matrix, mainly for this phase of the project. We'll have another one when we pick the preferred option, but this is really looking at cost and site design issues and the building location, outdoor programs, zero net energy, reuse. We did take the liberty of filling out some of them because some of these things are just facts. Is it complex to phase? Where would you put a future expansion? How many, does it have a partial basement? Daylighting opportunities, how many, what are the field quantities? So the major addition and minor renovation, there's 1 new field, and the loop is 1 new field, but the wrap has 3 new fields. And then the Z&E, so I should have said to you that 1 is the best and 3 is more challenging. So we started filling this out, but I think if we could focus on the new construction tonight and have a discussion around that, and we could go back to the options, the site plans for discussion, and maybe open it up to conversation around siting and parking and the relationship to Horace Mann and the things that you see that are visible on this site plan. Do you want to say anything?
No, I think that's, I think tied to this conversation is whether or not is the Salerno Center and the kind of potential use for storage in that area. Sorry. Tied to this conversation is whether or not the Salerno Center is remaining on site as part of storage or not. Because obviously, the scheme that puts the new build on Highland Avenue, it's directly kind of in the footprint of the building.
So there was a lot of discussion, and I won't say any names, but there's some people who really feel strongly about the Paul and Rick. And we understand it's really good to reuse an asset that you have, we get it, but what drives the siting of the project? That area where that new build is, as someone pointed out, is close to Highland, it's close to the existing building. This is the larger building program, so it will reduce a little bit, but there's a lot of first floor needs in a CTE academic building. So it might squeeze a little bit, but I can tell you, even though Paul has a lot of confidence in us that we can reuse that building, which is red. You all see the red rectangle? That's challenging. So, and that's about 8,200 square feet in that building. So that is something to be addressed.
So it is challenging. It's something I think that most of the, if not all the members of the design workshop would like to see at least investigated on how it is that it can either survive or not. We're at a point where there's a squiggle on a plan. We know there's a lot of thinking. I know there's a lot of thinking in that squiggle, but there's a lot of room to manipulate the building's massing and the disposition of the program. I just don't want it to be off the table as a possible way of integrating it. Certainly the ad reno scheme could do that because it's outside the footprint. And I think we're not considering the Salerno building the tail that wags the dog. That's like not even on the table. It's just more than a cursory discussion and an attempt to try to integrate it because it's 8,000 square feet of fairly significantly important and applicable square footage for district storage, for vehicle storage on site, for programmatic pieces that are in the program that are quite large in terms of its overall quality and quantity. And if it can be removed into an existing building, that'd be great. There's embodied energy in that building, so we've talked a lot about sustainability. I think that's a conversation that should also enter. So
Maybe we can move it.
If it can't work, we get it. But
Maybe we can relocate it.
a little bit more. Well, maybe. I don't know.
I mean, if you
At
look,
some point, it'll tip the balance away from it.
maybe, but
Yeah,
maybe
maybe.
not. It's worth
But it's worth, we think, at least the beginnings of that.
And just to recap, you have the existing building location, so the Salerno Center is not impacted. There's not that many site locations on this site. We have this location where we have the renovation addition, makes sense, right? We have this location where it's pushed up by Wilson and the Salerno Center is not impacted other than parking and circulation and those kinds of things, but we would work around that. And then there's this location. So there's no magic. There isn't another location to build a building of this size. We sort of have those 4 locations. And this one obviously has the greatest impact to that building. So I think we'll open it up to conversation. I think for purposes of maybe this part of the discussion, we assume that we'll do our best, but it may be challenging in the other scheme, but maybe talk about the two schemes with respect to the other attributes that are beneficial or challenging to the committee. And I'll let the working group maybe take the lead in the discussion if.
Well, I'm happy to voice my opinion, but I don't want to skew things too much either. I really like the loop as a building, the opportunities that I see in that for the school are fantastic. I worry a little bit about how close it is both to Horace Mann and to the Highland and Wilson. It feels kind of jammed in that corner. And we're only gaining one field. Even though we've jammed it into the corner, we're only picking up one field. With the wrap scheme, if you go to the next one, I feel like this one we're picking up 3 fields. Retaining all the parking, retaining the field behind Horace Mann, separating the circulation of the two systems. You have parent drop off in the front and the bus drop off around the fields.
Can you mention ledge?
There,
Hampton Beach.
yeah, there's ledge in both. There's less ledge here, I think, than there is on the other one. I do harbor some concern about this one, given how close it is to the existing building and how close it is to Highland. It feels very tucked in as well, but I know it's 20% bigger than where we are now, or whatever, 15% bigger than where we are now. So I know it's going to get a little smaller. I also wonder if there's a scenario where we demo some of the existing building on that end in the first phase to give it more elbow room, so we don't build something and then feel like, why is it pushed all the way into the edge of the
Yeah.
site? So
We looked at that and we can go back to that, but just the auditorium and the gym and the cafeteria located on the first floor right now, those haven't changed. Those square footages haven't changed, so it's a matter of what's wrapping it. There was a really big daycare piece that has been reduced to 1 classroom, so that's good. So there may be some wiggle room.
Can we just see where you just talked about those 3 pieces that haven't changed?
Right, so-
Can we see where those are?
Yeah, there's the auditorium, right there, and the gym is right here, and the cafeteria is in the front. So those footprints haven't changed because they're kind of standard.
Yeah. And it's important to note that those squares on the page also have support program that can't move off the ground level as well. So loading for the kitchen itself, the locker rooms for the gymnasium, the music programs that support, an operating theater so that they can become a green room for the theater itself. All those things want to be on that ground level as well. So there's a lot that has ground level preference that hasn't changed in the program. And so when Brooke says the ground level footprint really hasn't changed, even though the program has reduced. It's the things that are upstairs that have come down in size.
Except probably the daycare.
The daycare is the exception.
Yeah, that got smaller, so, but it doesn't mean we can't manipulate this. I think we should look at the phasing and maybe some partial demolition, which we looked at earlier.
Yep.
We have to look at what's in that corner, we have to replicate. But why don't you continue with your,
I mean, that's my 10,000 foot level comparison. I'm open to other feedback.
I mean, the other big component, I think, my understanding is the CTE program requires ground level.
some of them, not all of them.
I know, but certainly some.
Yes.
So,
And some of those have gotten smaller, so that helps a little.
Yes, you guys will make whatever option we pick look fabulous, I know. So it's going to certainly be better than this. I feel like, one, that whole ledge is concerning, not just for cost, we talked about, being able to open windows, maybe we can think about that, what's facing Highland. But also the redesign of Highland Road that hopefully someday will occur. The redesign is a much nicer road with a lot more sort of trees and amenities along it. So I feel like it won't be as, not that it won't be busy and things like that. Yeah, it will maybe be a little bit more of a pleasant to drive along and then see this beautiful high school. But what I liked about the loop was the center part, the courtyard part. And it'd be interesting to see, like, in the other one, do you have any kind of sort of gathering area? Not necessarily like the loop, but like a gathering area where people would, green space. It's hard, I can't see very well from here.
Yeah.
Go on.
The wrap scheme really treats the front door as a plaza space. So rather than have an internal space like the loop, it proposes that drop-off area really be that south-facing plaza space that becomes the space where the cafeteria could spill out into it, and the life of the school can come outside. And we've seen schools before kind of take the approach with their drop-off loop that they're used in the morning and afternoon, but during the day they could be treated in a way so that they feel more like a plaza, and the school can kind of take over that space rather than it always be focused on cars. So for this scheme, it really isn't about an internal space that's outside, but one that is on the edge of the building.
And having 3 fields, those upper fields are really difficult, and they're not accessible, and they're not using it, kind of in the woods, buggy. So it sort of opens up the ability maybe to think about other uses for those over time.
Yeah, I want to add, the mayor isn't here tonight, but you might remember that there was a discussion a couple of months ago about potentially carving off a part of the site for affordable housing development. And the city had done a study on the corner where the Salerno Center is now to look at some potential housing. And the consultant team advised the mayor and Tom Daniels that if they were going to look at a site, for affordable housing, that they look at the site on the other side of the power lines, which is where those 2 fields are now. So now that decision is not made in any way. I think it actually, and I'm not going to put you on the spot, but there is this a potential project percolating there, and I think to Jenna's point, the thing about those fields is really problematic, the ones that are on the other side of the power line, is how they're not accessible. So if we kept them or refurbished them or considered them part of the project, there'd have to be quite a bit of site work in order to make an accessible path to them. So to me, when I look at these plans, they're becoming a little bit prehensile. They're an existing condition, which I could see us moving away from, which is why this scheme where you get more fields right adjacent to the school feels like a real plus.
To be clear, Patrick, could you clarify on the loop scheme, the courtyard is actually elevated, right? Because you have a program on that first floor that fills the entire first floor. It's not a grade.
Yeah, and there's probably a couple ways now that the program has shifted substantially that we might be able to rethink how that's configured. So, that's one of the things. If this scheme moves forward, we would dive into a couple options on how that worked.
I'd like to ask a question about the loop. I know that we talked about how the site, the building would be kind of tight there. Do I remember that you also talked about how internally as well that it seemed to be a little tighter in terms of where classrooms and programs were, or were we just discussing the siting of the building?
I think just the siting.
Just the siting.
Yeah.
And here's another kind of crazy question on this loop. The courtyard wouldn't be a place that would retain a lot of heat, like during the day. Like there wouldn't be a buildup of heat during the day, would there be?
No, it's something that we can design so that you're treating the exterior materials in a way that you gain heat when you want it.
Okay.
So one of the nice things about spaces like this is that they can They can actually retain some of that warmth in your shoulder seasons when your students are in school, and make it a space where they can be outside and extend the life of the school. If you've been to the Boston Public Library, you know that courtyard space in the city is nice even on some of the worst days in the fall and spring.
Thank you.
But I think you should really look at, and someone should talk about the circulation on this one, because it's not only close to Wilson and Highland and that intersection, but you have to load, between the houses and the building. The field house is a little trickier to have direct access to from, it's more in the front, and maybe things can move around a little bit, but it's definitely trickier, the site circulation, than this one. This one is a little freer and has more opportunities and doesn't feel quite as pinched. We like the Loop too. It could be a really fun building, and who knows, maybe it'll appear again in another location. You never know. But it is tight circulation-wise.
Yeah.
A question, just thinking ahead operationally, is there anything that we should be aware of in terms of major potential differences in like ongoing operational costs between the two options for new construction? Is there anything unique about either of them that we should be aware of? Just thinking ahead to school budgets in the future.
Yeah, we did preliminary energy models for all of the schemes, and they're really within the margin of error, essentially identical to each other. So at this point, I wouldn't consider it a factor that would sway you either way.
So what makes the Loop have $3 signs and the S have $1 sign?
It's just the ledge.
If you go back
It's
to
the,
budget.
it's the line that's got
Oh,
the ledge
it's-
removed.
can't read what it says.
There's more ledge removal.
Yeah.
That's just, so if you follow that line across, it's just the ledge. So you're just removing more ledge in that location.
But the project costs are similar.
Yeah, the project costs.
When you look at the overall project costs, there's not a considerable margin between the two of those new construction schemes. It's not nothing, but at this phase of estimating,
Other,
Is the Loop gonna be really challenging for you guys to get programming?
I think it's a different way of thinking of a school, where you might kind of enter the school and circulate up and around the loop, and kind of thinking about kind of, in a way, touring the school as a student, vertically as you move up through. It's not a scheme that puts the interior space at its center. It would be off-center, which is really a different way of kind of thinking about the school organization. And really that's something that kind of in this phase, we're going to start to study multiple ways that you can think about organizing the school. We're learning more about kind of the school community and how they want to position parts of the program next to each other. And really, in a way, we want to focus the conversation on the site strategy, but not the building strategy, because there's room in this phase to explore multiple ways of configuring the building just on different parts of the site.
Yeah, I mean, while we say we're not taking the Salerno Center off the table for this discussion, because we know this will be more challenging in this scheme, so we don't want that to be lost in the conversation, because we know there's a strong feeling and attitude about the preservation of this building, and we get it, but it will be more challenging in this one. We're not saying impossible, but it would be a little more challenging, but those are the trade-offs we have to look at. Is it, and I think Patrick is really right in saying this is the level of detail, not necessarily the perfect configuration of the building, but do we like this location with the fields and the green space and the circulation and the relationship to Horace Mann and the visibility on Highland Avenue? Or do we like you know, coming in and having the building really prominent off of Wilson and having the one field and keeping, you know, that ledge by Highland. I mean, those are the kind of levels. Yes, please.
So, let me ask the question a different way about the loop versus the rack. I feel like the loop is very self-referential and would be very hard to be flexible with the design as we go forward from here, whereas the rack scheme is more open-ended, and if you need to pull one of those legs and tail it out to, you know, the geometry of that feels to me like we're giving ourselves more flexibility down the road for the thing to change and adapt through the design process. The other one is so conclusive.
I think that's true. Yeah.
Pretty tight. And we made a tight compressed building there, which, you know, that's very site specific.
And it feels like if we had to come back when we grow the district to 1,500 students,
Exactly.
and we have to come back to this one, where do we do it? As
On
opposed
the
to the
ro-
other one, which
up.
we have to go up.
Up.
Yeah.
And some of them, and we did put that in this matrix. There's a line that says future expansion, which is adjacent, and all the other schemes were going up,
Got it.
unless something changes in the development stage.
What about for, to give us a sense of size for students or teachers? They got a class here, and then they got a class all the way at the other end, at the bottom floor, all the way to the top. Like how much of a distance is it for a kid or a teacher who has to traverse the whole thing in 5 minutes or something? I don't have a sense of
It's
scale.
more compact. That one's more compact than the existing building.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They're both more compact than the existing building.
So would there be ways for them to go in the S1 through?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
The preliminary
Or are
plans.
they going like this?
The preliminary plans that we drew have a kind of shortcut that,
Yeah.
that skewers it, so so you could kind of take the full tour or cut across.
And say with the loop, they could go through the courtyard?
The loop, you would, to maintain the courtyard, you'd be able to shortcut on the side, but it really is a loop scheme, so.
Yeah. Except the first one.
And for the two schemes, is there these really novel new ideas? Are there examples of other these ones that have been built and lessons that have been learned? And
Sure.
like obviously nobody wants to do serial number one. There's like a lot of excitement about that, but there's a lot of risk that maybe it doesn't work. So can you speak to that on both?
Yeah, I think there's models for each of these as schools. So I would say none of them are kind of something that no one's tried before as a program typology. I think what's really novel that the district is doing is integrating CTE up within the floors of the building. So bringing CTE programs up and not just co-locating them all on a ground level is something that you don't see a lot of. Though, you know, we have other clients who are asking for the same thing. So I think it's a future trend, and you're out in front on it.
I had the good fortune. You see, when was that? Was I here about 10 days ago? I had to come up and check on an area, and I had a chance to visit the programming and web spaces, and that's a Chapter 74 program. The person who's doing it is got several different activities that she teaches. She happens to be in two rooms that are kind of down the corridor from each other. She wants to be in a single space, a single bigger space. But I thought it was a great example of a program that doesn't have to be on the ground floor, could be fully integrated into having other classrooms on either side of it, but is sort of being taught in a kind of more of a hands-on. So you have a classroom next to it that might be doing math, and then they're going into the programming and web design room and doing things, you know, that are coming out of the math curriculum, for instance. That can't really happen now because she's over here and they're over there. So it's that opportunity that I think is quite unique about the Salem program.
I think it's important to note, like, if we were to say, open up a conversation where you could demolish a wing of the existing building and gain a bit more flexibility in this site plan, that you could imagine the loop scheme there, you could imagine this scheme shifted away from Highland. There are other configurations that might come out of conversation once we really dig into the floor plans of the building. So the conversation really should be focused more on the siting of the building right now,
Yeah.
and less on what's exactly where and adjacent to each other, if that makes sense.
Because that's our next thing we're doing now. We're creating little blocks of all the programs. We're gonna take a pass at the adjacencies based on what we heard, and then we're gonna meet with, especially, there was a leadership group and others to talk about those adjacencies. So that's kind of after we pick, the preferred site, because then we'll develop those three options relative to what people are thinking about in terms of adjacencies.
So I'd say, so I do have some experience with a loop concept. High schools, Hamilton Wenham is actually a donut. Incredibly poorly designed, this one will not be. But one of the problems is, as you traverse around this courtyard or this loop, it's difficult for you to figure out where you are relative to other places in the school. That one particularly doesn't put sort of very specific elements that could ground you. Like the cafeteria is the only place where you're in the section of the loop that's a cafeteria, you go, oh, I'm in this section. Otherwise, it is a complete, it all looks the same, it's hard to see where you are. And there had been, even as an architect, many times when I just blew by places where I should have been because I'm just in this literally loop. Whereas the S scheme, lab scheme, there is an idea you're on the east side of the building, on the west side of the building, or on the north side. You look out the window or you see where you are relative to other spaces, particularly the auditorium and the gym, which is your center point. You're either on the left of it or the right of it. So it's not about wayfinding so much, but it is about this idea of orientating in a building. It's very cool. I mean, the Guggenheim is very cool.
Yeah.
You do, it's just not a great museum. I'm afraid, and I agree with Rick, the loop scheme has not the potential, it may lock you in as a conceptual idea and harder to manipulate when, the auditorium really needs to be on the other side because, all of a sudden it's difficult. Because there's not that much room to move.
There's no more room. I mean, you have the,
It is an incredibly intriguing form, and I think that's why at least the architects are like, ooh, but they may not be as successful as they think, irrespective of whether Solana Center stays or not.
One thing I do like about the graph is I'd love to see, we were talking about the site, and I feel like, if we look at, I think of it as an S, and the south part of it, I feel like there's more opportunities to create experiences, quiet areas, more engaged areas, like that front could be a super, with the fields and the entrance could be really engaging. Kind of have some areas that could be quieter, some that could be kind of flashy or like however you think, but I feel like there's opportunities to create almost different schools feeling, feel, I'm not an architect, but different feelings at different part of it.
It's a
great
it's very
and I feel
astute.
like this school is going to have so many personalities, like the CTE and the 9th and
Yeah.
12 and all the different things we talk about. And a lot of people talk about having the quiet spaces, the places to gather, the small, so I think it would be interesting to see if that can be kind of really, you have more to play with in that.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important distinction. Well said.
and I'm surprised that people aren't talking more about the visibility from Highland, because I have driven on Highland probably 10,000 times. Okay, it's a lot. That's exaggerating, but many, many times over the last 27 years, and I honestly didn't know for a long time that the high school was there. So I think it's pretty amazing to have a beautiful view of your new school on such a busy street. And I don't know what people think of that, but that would be a real symbol for the community and the community's educational sort of future and vision.
And I think if you, it has the benefits of that, where the loop has all some of the negatives of it being close to it, but the houses in the way, you don't have that full exposure.
Yeah.
It's hard to stand back from it.
Some of us like pump stations.
I
It's
will
not-
punch the station, but when it overflows, then that's.
So, Nate would be very disappointed if we didn't keep the time, so, I would like, I don't know if I really wanna call for a vote, but I'd love to see like a straw poll, like a show of hands between between the loop scheme and the wrapped scheme. So, has everyone heard enough, or do people have other questions before I call for that? Heard enough? Zeke?
Well, the loop scheme, if we do some demolition on this scheme, obviously, that we pushed it away from the existing building as much as we could, but it's obviously not that much. I mean, we've built 20 feet next to an existing building, so if we do some demolition on the high school, that would have an impact. The loop doesn't, but the loop is very close to Horace Mann, just physically. Once you build this building, it's pretty far from Horace Mann, and obviously, once the building's down, it's down. But this one is a matter of whether or not you do some demolition to free up some space before.
And I'd say the biggest impact for this scheme is, for the loop scheme, is to figure out a temporary parking
Yeah.
solution.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, very
Lori,
tough.
Lori, can I just put you on the spot? So you're a real life teacher. Can I just put you on the spot, like, any feedback on these? Because you're a real life person living in this building. Will live in this building, and also Rylan, I mean, you'll be graduating, but.
I think, both of them are really unique and I like both designs, but, I guess my only concern would be just make sure the windows obviously good quality noise level, not so it's not distracting. I think visually, no matter if you put it there, kids are gonna be like, they're very distracted when they look out my window in my classroom and they see everybody coming and going and whatnot. But I don't know how it would be in a pilot app, to be honest. But I don't really have anything else really to say.
I mean, so is that a factor, just with proximity to Highland?
Well, Belmont is next to a train right by the tracks, and they don't even notice.
There are ways to mitigate noise, definitely. That's really just a detailing. Obviously, there's a bit of cost associated with it, but not exorbitant costs. And the distraction, I think, in talking about a partial demolition and pulling the building further away from Highland would give us the opportunity to put vegetation there, think about screening that in ways that are natural.
Because I'm visualizing like Saugus, how Saugus High is like right up
Right there.
against Route 1, and I just,
Yeah.
my marvelous teaching will, distract the kids enough.
But I do like the idea that, like, the signature flagship building is gonna pop.
Yeah.
You know, like, I think it could be a real big selling point for Salem, right, to have this beautiful
Yeah.
facility that everybody's gonna be able to see. Now you have no idea where Salem High is if you drive by.
You don't.
Horace Mann, you
Yeah.
know, but
Yeah.
you can't miss Saugus High.
No, you can't.
And that's why I'm sort of, I'm visualizing
Yeah.
in my head.
Okay, so can we get a show of hands, I guess, those in favor of the wrap scheme? And those in favor of the loop? I think think you have a strong preference for the RAP scheme to
Yeah.
develop that more fully with some of the comments we've said.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, that was
Super
really
helpful.
helpful, and, we can proceed with the 3 schemes.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
And as we said, we're gonna take a look at this site now and
Yeah,
think
we can.
about a number of different ways that the program could get configured on it.
And really come back then to the matrix, because the matrix becomes a real focus of public discussion, right? This is a real tool for that public discussion.
That would be the other thing I would say, like, we worked with, the working committee worked with Brooke and her team and Margaret and her team to put this list of criteria together. This has been sent around to all of you. If you're like, I can't believe you forgot this or that or the other thing, please speak up and we will add it to the matrix and it will be one of the criteria.
And yes, but the next time we will really use the matrix will be when we select a preferred option, and all those educational components will go back in.
That's true. We had a whole bunch of other things that Brooke
Right.
rightly reminded me, especially for Lori's sake, like, what about, is this the best for integrated CTE? Is this the best? And we're too ahead. We're not there yet. So that would come back in later.
So when you select the preferred option, those educational pieces will be in this matrix. So this was for the level of detail we have now, which is fine, but then we'll increase that. So thank you for your,
Do you have, sorry, on that matrix, do you have, disease, like disruption to this building or Horace Mann as a score, like a part of it? I think parents would probably be.
yeah, we have phasing and logistics complexity, which is
It's part of the cost section.
really right below the cost, phasing and logistics right here.
Yeah.
And we said that the impacts for the first 3 would be pretty significant, and the impacts for the new construction is a 1, which is much better than the 3.
But I think Neil makes a good point. There's a cost component, but there's also an operational impact component, and we should. This is capturing the differences, not.
I think they're almost one and the same, because there's a lot of cost, because there's a lot of impact, but
Right.
yeah.
Speaking of cost,
You're not.
I'm gonna go up there because I don't have a loud voice and I want to talk this way.
Those the fins?
Actually, these are not. That's the slide for the end. Does she have her slide?
Oh, here.
Oh, here we go. Okay, great.
Oh, if you skip to that first line, go back to that.
Yeah, exactly.
Hi everyone, those that are from very long, I'm the finance director for the city. And so the presentation I have tonight for folks, and let me know if you can hear me. I know I was sick a couple weeks ago, my voice isn't totally back yet. Can you guys hear me okay?
Turn the fans on.
I'll try to yell. So wanted to just give folks, clearly we don't have a final option, which means you don't
it's $650 right now, which is a reimbursement on building and site together, just applied as the square footage, and the square foot cost we're using as a working number here is 1,000. So the $350 difference is unreimbursed, and that is the biggest impact on the town share.
And so they periodically have changed that reimbursement cap. I think certainly we would explore leveraging whatever, political capital we might have and encouraging further review of the cap. I think we would certainly do that. So just to encourage continued periodic review on their end. I think the last time, they hadn't raised it for a while, but a couple of years ago, they did increase it.
They raised it last December.
So,
They've raised it multiple times recently, and before that it was a long period of time.
So unclear how much we could anticipate that being toggled, but we'll see. It's a couple years out for construction for us, so we'll see what happens and see if MSBA makes any changes in that timeline.
So it gets set, that will get set.
When we
And
submit, that's right. at the
It's
time we
schematic
submit.
design, which is, so when we make the submission at the end of this year, and they have their meeting in February, so in February, whatever the cap is that day,
Locked in.
that's it.
So we're locked in.
Yeah. But a lot could happen between here and then.
So we will.
And it's very market driven.
Yes, so depending on how things are going with inflation, et cetera, we are keeping a very close eye on that. Other changes that are happening, that could be impacting costs for buildings, could be influencing their decision making around that. So, but that is, when we're thinking about how we're going to approach financing, clearly we need to understand how much the city is responsible for, and that's a major piece right there. And then the next piece that we would consider, knowing that we would, a debt exclusion would be necessary to afford this for the community, we would want to evaluate, well, how do we mitigate that debt exclusion, because that's net new taxpayer dollars would be needed, and so how do we make that more manageable for taxpayers to the greatest extent possible? And so we would look at, are there other revenue opportunities that can help pay that debt? And so even if a debt exclusion is approved, maybe the debt service isn't one for one being paid via that debt exclusion, maybe some other revenues are helping to pay that debt, helping to pay off that debt service. And so, as Margaret mentioned, we are exploring an opportunity potentially related to housing development on the site. It's very preliminary. We're exploring that, seeing if that's an option. We're looking to run some numbers to see if that is something that could be helpful here. And then, of course, we would pursue any grant opportunities to offset components of the project. We would aggressively pursue any opportunities that are available to us, so that those grants can either directly pay or potentially help us pay if there's permissible in the grant to help pay off debt service. If the grants directly pay for portions of the project, that is less we would even eventually finance that piece of the project that the grant paid for. Additionally, the Inflation Reduction Act has some opportunities under the direct pay provision, which Neil will be able to speak to more eloquently than I can, but there are certain, it makes us actually eligible for tax incentives, which is typically something not available to municipalities for certain clean energy elements of our project. Neil, is there anything else? I don't want to put you on the spot, but anything else? Clearly we pursued that, the opportunity still exists. It is in federal statute to my understanding, so we're hoping that will be available to us.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. So that's solar and geothermal for us, but it's when you talk about geothermal, it's the system which can include potentially the equipment in the building.
Yeah.
So it's not just the wells that are outside, so it's a big chunk of money.
Yeah, so that could be very meaningful to us. So we would, assuming that is available, we would absolutely pursue the opportunity, which again would reduce the amount that we would need either to borrow or would give us the ability to pay back that debt through those reimbursements. And then the other piece, and this is a little bit wonky, but we do strategic borrowing with any debt project for the city, but we'll be
just add one quick thing before you leave. So the toggles here on that slide are, if we reduce square footage, the dollar number at the top goes down. If we reduce areas that aren't reimbursed, the percentage goes up. So those are the moving pieces behind this. This was generated from a form that the MSBA uses called a total project budget, which is different from the estimating numbers, and I made an educated guess here that we were going to reduce square footage a little more. So that's why this number is a little bit less than the number you saw earlier.
Does this take into account like other reimbursements that we would get for the project?
No.
Potentially?
No, it's not touching on, it's just looking at the MSBA total project budget
Right,
form.
but
And
would the grants be factored in? I mean, would we know that before the debt exclusion, like what?
oh, yeah, yeah.
So that this, whatever the numbers could come down based on grants and.
So I don't know if we would necessarily know all the grant opportunities in advance of the debt exclusion. So I think it is likely that as it's potentially, as the project is underway, a new grant opportunity could arise and we could potentially apply for it. And it would just ultimately, it would affect sort of that same example. If the debt exclusion is here, but annually through the annual budget process, we realize, well, we just got this grant, we got this, we got that. We don't need to exercise our full authority to tax up to this rate, we'll tax here, because that's all that's needed because we have other offsets from grants and other sources of funding. That would be how it would get accounted for that. And so I think typically sort of the
It's below the line. of
yeah,
this,
and also this is sort of an aside, but my understanding is that like what will likely happen if all of this proceeds is that similar to when the bond authorization was presented to City Council just for this stage of the project, the full cost of that was requested to be authorized to be bonded. That was not offset by the MSBA reimbursement that we're getting for this piece of the project. Similarly, whatever this number is, I believe would be the number that would go to council, which would then be the number I believe that would be similar to what the debt exclusion would refer, but the bond authorization, as all of our authorizations are written, they are written that they require it to be adjusted for any grants or reimbursements. And so even if this number is authorized, that there's language in there that says this less anything else you get. And so we would do this because this number and what this number ultimately is, as I understand it, we don't really know until the very end, like what the final number actually is.
It's, everything about this needs to say estimated at the beginning. So.
And if you get IRA money, for example, it comes off the 249.
Yes.
MSBA doesn't take any of it.
Right, and so this, basically think about it, this is sort of where we're starting. This is MSBA, and then from here we would go, hopefully, take this down by IRA, grants, exploring this housing project to see if some of those revenues could be, if that could come to fruition, some revenues can pay off future debt service related to that. And so the goal will be that we'll be chipping away even further at this number.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. So, I'm a visual. I like to look at charts and graphs, so I tried to paint a incrementally increases year over year. Debt rolls off, and you sort of fill that in with new debt each year to maintain your infrastructure and make sure those investments are occurring. So as debt's rolling off and as we're adding just new regular capital plan debt on here, how much space do we then have to potentially absorb some of the blue lines without it having to hit the debt exclusion? So like how much of that can we kind of get into our normal cadence of borrowing, either within existing tax rate or just sort of normal annual budgeting, so that it's less net new on the debt exclusion? I mean, it's not up here, but there's certainly some space potentially here down below as we're refining the yellow annually for our other projects to help kind of reduce that tax burden. So we're trying to do a lot of work on that. And the other piece I wanted to mention, that debt exclusion is likely not kicking in until 2028, 2029, depending on the exact timing of construction and where we are in the fiscal year. And so there's a little bit of a ramp up. And so we would look into figuring out, is there a way to maybe smooth some of this so it's not potentially such a large jump. So we would look into how we can maybe do that. But regardless, there's likely to be going from zero school building project to $100 million in construction costs over the course of a year. It's not easy to smooth that, but we would do what we could to try to do that. What else do I want to say? Something else. Any questions on just how to understand the assumptions that are baked into this model right here?
And I don't know if I'm sure you're thinking of this, it's just, and this is more complicated and you're keeping it, but how do we get into sort of the full life cycle? Because I know 30 years, you guys are going to give us a nice, strong, tight building, but mechanical equipment's going to fail, right? And so I think about that, like thinking about how do we make sure we maintain this building, but also I think about how do we present that it's not like, there's not an option where we don't have some blue, because if, say everybody's like, we have to do something here at the high school, even if it's to bring it up to code. So that blue is something.
So the blue would just, think about it this way, think about it as we go along the way, at some point, some of this yellow is also maintaining infrastructure in the regular.
But it would have to probably grow to get this up to code, because it would be a big expense to get this building.
Sure, yeah, depending on the job, yeah.
Yeah.
Depending on the job.
Paul said this really well when we were talking about this. The $100 million.
Yeah, so the difference between I think it was the admin, just the straight reno scheme. So if the city did nothing at all, except acknowledge that this building fails on its HVAC, does not have adequate spaces designed for the educational program, the facilities are breaking down, that difference between the renos and the
Code, just the code of it.
just the code upgrade is $100 million, of which the MSBA funds 44% of it. So the city owes $60 million. So there's a $60 million delta between essentially just a renovation of this building versus getting a brand new building. And so I guess I understood you as that, and I think you're right. No matter what, if you decided to renovate the building in 2029, that blue line would be not that much shorter. Because of accreditation, but generally this building is falling apart and might not be utilized. So for the community to understand, it's not just an additive for a new building. There's going to be something in the end that we have to do here, and if it's the minimum amount to get it. So that would be an interesting graph as a juxtaposition to the new building. And I think I also, now the light bulb went out, what you're saying is the yellow actually, some of that blue moves down. The yellow sort of isn't as, like in 2049, there's not $7 million in allocated funds for the yellow. I mean, right now we're probably in the million, maybe less than a million, 2027 and 2029. So does that mean the blue lines drop if the yellow lines are and not budgeted.
So we'll think about this way, the blue is only the debt associated with the school building project. And whether it's new construction or reno, the blue is only the high school project. The yellow is all the other capital projects that we're doing in the city right now that don't have any of, these are sort of our standard annual, this assumes that we finance $6 million in new projects for the city's just regular capital planning every year. But what I would say as part of that yellow are our regular main schools, so like so as the school is getting old, as our Zoom school or whatever version of it is getting older, we'll still be paying off the project, but down here we'd also be maybe authorizing, after it's been so long.
And I didn't mean to, I took two things and lumped them together, I'm sorry I did that. The juxtaposition would be if you did the calculation with the blue lines on the basis of just renovation.
Oh yeah, we can definitely run more, we wanted to just kind of present.
Because I think the delta between that and the idea that that has to be done sooner or later, sooner is probably, right, sooner, like yesterday,
Yeah, it's
there's
not
gonna be
gonna,
allocations we're gonna have to borrow.
it's a difference of $60 million, it's not gonna look all that much.
Right,
It's
I think
gonna be
that's,
like,
that's the point.
it's gonna be like right here.
It's key to the public to understand, like, if you just do a code upgrade, you don't update any of the teaching, you don't do anything, you just bring it up to code. The difference is like very modest.
And you could
We're
show
doing
that
nothing.
overlaid on this,
Yeah,
Right.
Did a line
little
on top of it.
white or blue or something that,
once we sort of have a bit of a more refined number, like once we sort of are coalescing around the option, we can start, like, we'll rerun things to see how that tells us, and then we can sort of show for those options, like, how they compare to each other.
And ultimately, what a average household in Salem, the difference between those two costs.
Yeah.
Not that we're promising that you're gonna get a debt exclusion in the future for any of the schemes, but it will have to happen. Because we
Yeah.
can't
We can give a potential impact related on what the current assessed values are now, and then under the scenarios where, what we'd be able to give would be a scenario in which, 100% of the debt is debt excluded, like, except for, whatever, we can say on that other slide, that the 250 number that we had, we give a scenario for that. It's hard to say, you don't know necessarily all of the direct pay or all of the grants, but it would say, assuming all of this is debt excluded and at current assessed values, we give the resident a tax credit for that. We could give them a and it would be a scenario again, because assessed values will change over time, but it at least gives folks a sense of what we're at.
Thank you. I feel like this was very helpful for me. And I just wanted to have a similar comment of, well, what does this mean to the residents? Like, and I know every year you do the average increase or average tax base. It would be helpful to know what this was on top, along with what if we did max out our levy, which we never do. And how are we going to balance those two?
So I can tell you as an example, for this blue lines that are here right now, in this scenario that I have right here, which, and again, this right here is the debt service. It doesn't say how it will be paid for. If 100% of this was paid for in a debt exclusion, with no other further reductions for grants or other sources, this, and using the interest rates we're using, current assessed value in a 29-year schedule, it's $148 per 100,000 assessed value. So we're around 250.
each year.
It's not, yes.
Yeah.
Well, at each, and that's at the height, like that's at the height of the payments. So that would be, yes. So that would be the additional sort of amount if it was maxed. If it was fully debt excluded.
With 100,000 assessed value.
Yeah, $148 per 100,000 assessed value resident based on current assessments in this space.
No, I'm sorry, I'm just
Yeah.
trying to remember what my assessed value is.
Lots of calculators
So we will, and again, as the numbers become more refined, we can be able to work better. And again, they'll be based on the assumptions we have. And then I think there's kind of a slide. So just, the key takeaways then,
in from them and talking about how that might potentially mitigate some of this, not necessarily on this site, but all the other, there's one that Salem State has, right? So if that went online, that could potentially, and I know that's other things it needs to take care of, salary increases, other things, but it's just a way to think about, like, we've talked about growth in this community and how it can help support the community, and maybe there's some specific ways for us to show projects that aren't online yet, paying that potential opportunity.
Yeah, it's really good to see what's out there and online. And so I think that's a really important point. When the city does its budget every year, a major component of that, I mean, that 63% of the city's budget is people with property taxes. So it's a major component of the budget. When there's new growth, that is automatically allowed, the city's automatically allowed to take that new growth, the value of that new growth, and that gets applied to whatever, the rate increase in the property taxes. So if we have a very healthy new growth year, there could be an opportunity. So looking at the debt service payment for that next year, if we have, great new growth that year, that could be a way that would help pay the debt service. We might not need to then necessarily go to the max of the debt service. So there were several other projects coming online that would be something the city could look at and say, we averaged a little over $1 million last year. We were split like 2.5. So say we had a year that was great. That would certainly be a conversation the city could have about allocating some of it. It's fun. It's in the gym. It's part of the gym. It's part of the ad reserve fund. It's available. It can be available to help for that information for the debt service.
I'm sorry, do commercial entities, their assessed values also get affected by the debt exclusion? That is, do they pay?
Yes, I have not run the numbers for commercial.
Will that offset that dollar? I mean, is it?
No, it would be part of it would always be part of the same government subsidy. Well, I guess I can caveat that one way. The city annually, when it sets the tax rate with the city council, evaluates there's a split tax rate, and so there's an ability to shift the burden between residential and commercial, and so annually it's evaluated in a way to ensure that that's not sort of goes appropriately every year. So, in terms of adjusting related to that, there will be an annual opportunity to evaluate if the city wasn't fully shifted, maybe onto commercial. That's something the city can evaluate at the time to see if it makes sense. But it would be I think it would depend on what the market is at the time. But it's the city.
Thank you, Anna. We need to keep moving, I think.
So we're running a little bit behind schedule. Can everybody stay a few minutes past 8? Because I think we're going to need 5 or 10 minutes to get there. Okay. Can we go back to the slide before Anna's? I just want to comment that, as we start to talk about the money, this is what I wanted to talk about briefly. We also want to be talking about what the reasons are that taxpayers might want to support the project. So I think I believe I referenced at the beginning that we had started to have a discussion about if we're going to create a video or talking points about the project as we start to move towards identifying the project cost and the taxpayer cost. These are the 5 bullets that have emerged from those discussions so far. So the first one, and I think always the most important one if you're asking people to pay more for a project, is why it's a good use of taxpayer money. There's a lot of reasons here. I've noted a couple here. Reducing the energy costs and the operating costs, leveraging the MSBA funding because it's being offered now, reducing the cost of unsubsidized repairs should the city pass on this, for instance. So there's a lot. Like once you get started talking about it, there's a lot. But I think that's, if you're asking people to pay more taxes, you need to tell them why it's a good idea. The other items that have come up are ensuring continued accreditation. The district has not been threatened with the loss of accreditation, but I would say if you read the accreditation report, it is clear that they are commenting on the conditions of the building as being negative in some cases for teaching. creating a better place to teach and learn. This is why we did the education program. Providing improved community assets, which I think goes to things like the field house or a equivalent gym, and particularly the fields, other assets where people are using the building who don't have students, who are maybe seniors or maybe other people in the community. And then the last one is investing in and for the next generation. This is, I think, a good framing for the video, and I think I'm interested in feedback from all of you on these, because I think it is actually time to start moving forward that video, and I think an opportunity here would be to have these points voiced in the video by different individuals. So for instance, the students could speak to the last point. I think it would be great if the superintendent spoke to accreditation, finance person speaking to the taxpayer item. But I think if we really want to start finding folks in the community who are interested in the project and willing to sort of be out front and speak for it in a video that could be widely circulated. So I'm going to leave that here because we're going to keep going. So let's go back to project delivery. So I am going to raise here an issue that we're going to be talking about in future meetings. So one of the decisions that this committee needs to make, in addition to selecting a preferred option in this phase, is to make a decision on whether you're going to have one of two forms of contractor participation in the project. One is the one that I think people are most familiar with, which is design, bid, build, which is where you have what's called a general contractor, and the other, which has been around since 2006, is something called construction manager at risk. If a construction manager at risk choice is desired by the committee, the greatest value of their participation is in the schematic design phase, which we will be starting in June. So therefore, another thing we need to talk about within the next couple of months is making this decision if we want to have a construction manager. So next slide. So I am just going to briefly touch on this. There's a brief description here of what the two are. On the left is some blurbs from Associated General Contractors who, if you read these, you will read they're a little biased in favor of construction manager at risk, but which is why we paraphrase on the right in red. Design, bid, build, you buy a building in accordance with plans and specs. You finish it, you bid it, people bid on it, you get a general contractor. Let's go to the next one. Construction manager at risk, you are hiring a professional service firm that provides input during design and then constructs the building in accordance with plans and specs. And you do that through a two-phase process where you do a qualifications-based shortlist, and then you ask the shortlisted firms to provide competitive cost proposals, and they are selected on a combination of qualifications and fees. So,
just to be clear, they are still hard bidding all of the work to subcontractors.
They are.
So you're still getting competition.
Yeah. And when I have more slides, I'll really dig into that. But yes, about 60% of the cost of the project in either case is trade bids, which are hard bid. So it's the difference that you see is in the 40% that is not hard bid. Next slide. So just laid this out here for people to understand looking forward. What I want to do in the April meeting is make a presentation on the options, and I'd like to take a vote in May on the project delivery option. If this committee chooses CM at risk, then we would want to nominate and vote on a subcommittee. And again, if we go down that path, the June meeting would be about reviewing what is in that qualifications package and how the procurement process would go. In July, we would advertise, shortlist, and interview. And that would mean that by August, which when we will be in the second month of schematic design, we would have the CM on board. So, I think that's the right way to approach this. We'll say a lot more about this on April 17th. And you will have questions, especially for folks who aren't familiar with this. I think there's some folks in this group who will really know this backwards and forwards, and for others it will be totally new. Jenna and I worked on a project for the city where we used a CM process.
I don't know how many schools of this size are done as design by build anymore, but particularly I think the logistics is where you're really gonna get your added value, but you're right, like getting them on early.
Yeah.
But it's the logistics, because they can come in and say, well, we could have thought, oh, well, you can do this, and they're gonna say, well, actually, if we do this, and this, you know, that would be a better way to approach it.
Yeah.
So, but I think we're just confirming, if we get a CM on risk on board and say we don't go with everything, will we just pay them basically their professional fees?
Yeah, they get
or-
as part of the procurement, we ask them for a fee for their schematic design participation. And you can also get a fee for their pre-construction participation. And the city or the committee can decide later to go hard bid. So you're not committed at that point, but if you want that service, if you want this other perspective, the construction perspective in the room, when you are setting the cost of the project, the basis of your agreement with the MSBA, this is what you want to do. So, lots to talk about. Next slide. Okay,
Anthony.
catching up here.
The working group met on March 14th and approved 2 invoices. One for answer advisory for February, $35,726.25. One for Perkins and Will for February, $65,030, for a total of $100,756.25. That's all.
So,
Any other new business items that we didn't anticipate in advance of the agenda? Any public comments? Rylan? Any public comment?
Sorry, I was just texting about
No,
my
no,
dog.
no, you're fine. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Oh,
So-
no, I don't have any public comment.
So on here, we're gonna go ahead and pin this May 8th meeting. It sounds like the May 15th meeting we should keep, which is 1 week later, in lieu of the May 22nd meeting. So the June 18th meeting, I think it's the June 18th meeting, it's the June 12th meeting is also an additional meeting that we talked about last time we were here. But once we get past this PSR, you can see it starts to normalize into a monthly meeting.
With that, I'll hear a motion to adjourn. Second? All in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.